Here's a rather sobering thought as we can think of the South. I am a token of the New South. I know those of you who lived all of your lives here probably have a difficult time accommodating that. But the reality is that the South is changing radically, okay? And in North Carolina alone, almost a third of all of the residents of North Carolina are from some other state. And the place where I live is called Cary, C-A-R-Y, North Carolina, which is an acronym for Congested Area of Relocated Yankees. There was only one native North Carolinian who all of my neighbors make fun of because of his deep southern accent. And he is the original farmer who sold the acres at $40,000 for a third of an acre. He doesn't work. The rest of us work for a living to pay off buying the farmland. So how did I do this? Oh, there's no, the last time I gave a concluding plenary, after I gave the plenary, the first thing I was greeted with was someone who came up from the audience and said, "You didn't mention me." So I tried to avoid that, and the way I've done it was, and this is sort of how I arranged my concluding remarks anyhow, was I sat down several weeks ago. Sometimes I sit down. And I thought of sort of, okay, let's taxonomize some issues related to the South and language. And independent of any of the papers that I saw, you know, and I had seen a few of them because I judged a few abstracts and so forth, I sat down and framed this taxonomy, all right? And then I went through and read all of the abstracts several times. So somebody said, "Oh, I see you have my name there, but you weren't at my paper." That's because although I do have multiple personalities, I couldn't be at several places at one time. And so what I did was that on the basis of my reading of the abstracts, and those of you who didn't show up, sorry you're in here, and those of you who gave a paper different from the one that you wrote up in your abstract will be misclassified. But what I did was I then went through and filled out my taxonomy. And then at the end, I have some remarks of some of the gaps. If I knew how to pronounce orally lacune or lacuna, I would pronounce it, but I'll just call them gaps. I had a few people in there, but I took them out because I thought they might feel insulted if I put them into the gaps. Okay, and to a certain degree, this represents where we are. And those of you who have read the volumes from the previous LAVIS, I guess that's what one says, can sort of compare in your mind. I didn't do a systematic comparison. All right. So let's just start by defining the South. And there are a number of issues that have been addressed here in terms of the socio-historical, ecological, social, and cultural issues, and sort of the demography of the South. And one of the things that I wasn't quite sure where to put Bukweni Salikoko because, he is a heretic and he is an eclectic and he could have gone lots of places. But one of the things that I think this is an important role for all of us, and he does it very well. And in terms of looking at the boundaries that we impose on the South, the definitions that we use, one of the things that he pointed out was the fact that we tend to deconstruct others better than we do ourselves. And so there are a number of issues. We're very good at at seeing where popular ideologies are and so forth. But we're not quite as good at examining the assumptions that guide our studies, whether they're historical, ecological, social, or cultural issues. And so these are the sorts of things that we look at. Now, in terms of linguistic structures and regional distributions, one of the questions that comes up is, to what extent do these linguistic boundaries coincide with cultural boundaries, geographical boundaries, and other kinds of specializations, definitions of the bounded South, or sort of the core South and then transitions outward. It's kind of interesting because when you look at the maps, and in an American speech introduction last year, I actually, somewhat facetiously but also seriously, sort of addressed the notion of how do you define the South, and so basically one of the cultural, I don't know if he's an anthropologist, cultural theorist, or actually has a nice map of where kudzu grows. And actually, that turns out to be just about as good as any. It actually coincides very neatly with ungliding in the South. And one of the reasonable hypotheses is that kudzu grows so quickly that it wraps around the tongue and keeps it from gliding forward. Now, the point is, there's a sense in which, it kind of depends on what you look at, and also in a sense, there are a number of Souths, if you will, and as our objective and subjective perspectives on the South indicate, and the many papers on perceptual dialectology, sort of inspired by Dennis Preston and amplified by many and corrected by many after him, also underscore this, people have an idea, but you really can't get real precise about it. Some of the perceptual work, the other side of perception, in terms of the Battle of the South and all of the variables that go into it, region, ethnicity, and so forth, is a nice complement, and in fact underscores sort of the different sides of looking at and perceiving the South. I'm fairly comfortable with the loosely bounded South because I think that perhaps is the reality. And then there's sort of the South extended, whether it's historically in terms of the Confederate soldiers, or whether it's present day in terms of transplant communities as studied by Bridget Anderson.